All right, welcome to today's Dev Breakfast. My name is Mike Marnoka. I'm a senior architect out of our Detroit office. This presentation is going to be a symposium recap. So Sitecore's big conference is Symposium, held in Las Vegas just last month. And this is going to be pretty high level. We're going to try to do some deep dives into some of the capabilities in other sessions, but wanted to get this out so everyone has a good foundation for what's coming and what's coming beyond that. So quick agenda, it'll be symposium recap is what was presented, kind of what was launched, and then a little bit into what's coming beyond the launch of Sitecore 9 and into next year. And then we'll open it up for question and answer as well. So the keynote really had a couple of things to highlight. The first thing to highlight was Sitecore is kind of rebranding the product name and creating this umbrella, I guess, name called the Sitecore Experience Cloud. And that's the umbrella name for their three main products, Experience Manager, XM, that's kind of the core CMS capabilities. The Experience Platform, XP, is kind of the full version of Sitecore, right, with Experience Database and all the marketing automation and tools in the suite. And then Experience Commerce is their commerce capabilities within Sitecore. They're still, calling it Sitecore 9 as a product number, but it will be under the Experience Cloud, naming umbrella. And then they sort of categorize their investment into, what they've been working on into three main pillars. Innovation, quality, and customer delight are the three main pillars or themes that they highlighted from an investment standpoint. So let's start off with innovation. Within innovation, they launched the brain is the slide, the visual of it, but they're calling it the Sitecore Cortex. So Sitecore Cortex is machine learning brought to the Sitecore platform. So I have a slide on this, that goes into more detail, but it's essentially automating things through machine learning. So it's going to be able to, score content and identify segments for you and do some of the, grunt work, if you will, of managing a CMS platform and using all of its marketing capabilities to do things on your behalf as a robot, if you will. Commerce. So commerce is still coming. It's going to be launched in early 2018, but they put a lot of investment into that and finally got rid of the commerce server legacy code and are. All right, let's continue here. So within the keynote, we talked about machine learning. Sitecore Cortex is their machine learning engine. It's tapping into the Microsoft Azure machine learning platform. Sitecore Commerce is coming next year, but that is a big investment for Sitecore. It takes away the legacy Microsoft Commerce Server components, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. The next innovation pillar is data and analytics. So the big announcement here was XConnect. XConnect is moving forward and giving you the ability to integrate any third-party system or data into your Experience database. It is also layering, putting a layer in between the Experience database platforms that is opening up the ability to use other databases besides Mongo database. So you can actually host your Experience database on Microsoft SQL Server, SQL Azure, and then in a future release, Azure Cosmos DB, as well as MongoDB will be your choices for your experience database. Extensibility. This was a big theme. So obviously they've spent more time with Microsoft in making this a cloud-first release. So Sitecore 9 is feature parity in the cloud and on-premise. So the Azure cloud, capabilities, everything is all up and ready to go. JSS and headless was another big announcement. I'll talk more about that, but essentially they put a lot of investment into making the platform available in a headless model and supporting more scenarios so that you could, in theory, run your website, on a non-Microsoft technology, and have it scale up and use all of the industry tools and services that are out there for managing websites, and really have Sitecore as a back-end service serving up content, but not losing any of the personalization, analytics, or even content editing capabilities in that headless model. They've also opened up federated authentication. So if you want to use, Google logins for your website, you can. The next major pillar was quality. So on the quality side, they touted, and this is the most tested version of Sitecore. It is going to be easier to upgrade once you're on the 9 version, and we have some slides to talk about that. But I think, in my mind, the two things that stand out are the addition of configuration roles. So, if you've ever done a production deployment of Sitecore, you know that you have to play around with the configuration files. You turn some on, you turn some off, you move these things around here and there. It's kind of a mess to manage all that. So they've made it where all the configuration files are on, and there's one line of configuration that says this server is a CD server, or this is a CM server, or a reporting server, and then it will go get the right configuration for you. So there's less moving parts there. They've also added configuration layers, and I'll dive into this a little bit more in a later slide, but it's segregating out configuration for modules, configuration for Sitecore, configuration for your custom stuff. So I think the punchline there is, you're going to have less support cases because your custom configuration messed up Sitecore. Or it'll be a little bit easier to take those things off and find issues and ease upgrade. And then, the last thing, I won't touch a lot about on this, but customer delight. They've appointed a chief customer officer. A bigger focus on making sure their customers are successful. The thing to note for us is they have announced that they will be doing implementation reviews, and you can read between the lines here, and maybe we call it the Helix police, but they will be looking for best practices on from their partners, and can audit those things, and they said there will be consequences. We're not really sure what those are, but we obviously want to be doing the implementations with best practices in mind. All right, so moving on to Sitecore 9. So Sitecore 9 is out and available. It was launched at Symposium, so you can download the installation bits and get going with it right now. Commerce was launched. Again, I'll talk about that later in another slide. The big changes in Sitecore 9 kind of are on the infrastructure side. So from if you're thinking about this as a developer and what do I need on my development machine, So this is changing, right? SQL Server 2016 is needed if you're going to use the Experience database on a local dev instance. So that may be a new tool that you haven't installed previously, or you have an older version of SQL, maybe 2014. No Lucene. So Solar is now the default search engine for an on-premise, and Azure Search obviously for the PaaS offering. So you will have to, have a local or available Solar instance, which requires the full Java virtual environment or Java runtime, as well as the SSL certificates for Solar to be running securely. So there's more setup there. No Mongo. So MongoDB is still on the roadmap, but it's actually not supported in 9.0. It will be added back in on 9.1. But your Experience database right now in 9.0 is either SQL Server or SQL Azure. They've also changed the way you install Sitecore. So there is a PowerShell install framework called SIF, stands for Sitecore Installation Framework. And so it's more configuration based. You'll have configuration files that determine what your configuration is going to be, and then PowerShell will actually install your version of Sitecore. Our own MVP Rob from Dallas has built a tool called Sifless to kind of ease that pain of managing your configuration and installation, and put a layer on that to make it a little bit easier. If you're on the SharePoint side of the world, it's kind of like SP install and the configuration manager for that. So it is moving more towards automated installs and scripting, and that also I'm sure helps them out on the Azure side in being able to stand up infrastructure with more scripting capability. I mentioned the role configuration a little bit earlier. So you can just specify in one configuration file whether your installation of Sitecore is going to act as a CD, a CM, processing, reporting, or standalone, right, for instance of like a developer machine. They have rewritten the Forms module, so it is no longer Web Forms for marketers. It's now just Sitecore Forms. I've got a slide that talks about that, but it is more drag and drop and easier to use, less developer focused and more marketing focused. They also put out a new version of the Sitecore Experience Accelerator, SXA. That's up to version 1.5. And from a licensing standpoint, if your customer is going on a consumption license, they now will have the ability to use the Experience Accelerator in that license. It's not an additional charge. I know that was definitely a concern in the past of SXA as a higher cost of entry, but now it is something to consider, I think, in the consumption license model. They revamped the Experience Editor from a performance standpoint, so they went from the Experience Editor calling 254 HTTP requests down to 72, and you cleaned up a lot of things in there. It's not going to make a difference on your local dev machine because it's all your requests are local, but when you're off of the CM server, you're going to see improvements there. They've added dynamic placeholders into the out-of-the-box product. So previously, this was always kind of a module or add-on approach, and now it's in the product. They've also added unlock synchronization. So the use case here is you're in Experience Editor and you're editing a page that has a shared uh, a shared item. If you unlock the page, it's going to unlock the item as well, so that you can modify that. And when you put a lock back on it, then it's going to lock everything for you. Federated authentication. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Marketing automation. There's UI improvements there. Xconnect, and I have slides on all these, so I'm just kind of highlighting them. Xconnect also brings Salesforce and Dynamics connectors out of the box, so that is a first class supported CRM for Sitecore to be supported right out of the get-go with 9.0, and then the headless. So this is kind of the summary of everything in 9. So let's talk about Sitecore Commerce. It's 100% Sitecore, meaning that it does not have the Commerce Server legacy anymore. It is built on .NET Core. I see that Sitecore is embracing the .NET Core. They're not there yet with 9.0 as the base platform, but from a commerce perspective, it is running on the .NET Core. They do or will have a Experience Accelerator storefront, so just another indication that they are embracing and moving forward with Experience Accelerator. It is more NuGet module based, so if you only need a shopping cart, but you don't need other store functions, right? They've broken those down so that you can pick and choose which ones you want to have in your solution. There's an improved product catalog and inventory management system, that is basically more Sitecore-like. So it's going to look and feel like all the other Sitecore, first-class products. And they've also changed the Speak UI to be Angular. So that is a new model for commerce, but also if you're extending anything or creating your own Speak UI, it's going to use Angular. All right, Sitecore Forms. So, completely redesigned, focusing on the user. It's a drag and drop form builder. There are form and field metrics showing the performance. It also supports basic multi-page forms, so fill out page 1, then go to page 2. It is MVC only, so if you have web forms, for some reason on Sitecore 9, you wouldn't be able to use the new Sitecore forms. Also consider that in any upgrades. And you can also create form templates. I'll zoom in here real quick on the page here, but you can see a little bit of the new form interface and how they've repositioned the analytics on the right hand side. Here's another marketing slide of a little bit what the UI is going to look like. So there's a canvas where you're going to create your form. You can have sections and headers, and then you drop your fields onto the form and configure their settings, save actions, similar concept, but just a different interface. Here's an example of what the multi-page form may look like, right? So on page 1, you fill out this information, and then there's like a next button that would take you to page 2. The thing to note here is they still don't have conditional logic out of the box. They said that you can, code or write code to have that capability, but it's not available today. Sitecore Experience Accelerator 1.5. So the big announcements here were around tenant shared content and presentation. So if you're doing, I think the Experience Accelerator lends itself well to microsites or quick quick sites that you have to stand up for, an event or other things. Previously, you weren't able to share that content and presentation between tenants, so this enables that and gives you the ability to clone content, for example, right? So you can have kind of this master set of content and clone that all out to your subsites, your brand sites, and some other improvements here. I also haven't looked at this in a while since the initial launch, and they do have what's called the Creative Exchange Live. So Creative Exchange is the whole, you can export your pages as static HTML and CSS and then import it back in, and it brings those style sheets and classes into the Experience Accelerator for you. Well, they've now made that more JavaScript workflow friendly. So through your Sass CSS and your gulp commands, you can interact with your Sitecore Experience Accelerator themes. So giving your front-end developers a little more first-class experience and not making it so much Sitecore focused. So they are embracing more JavaScript tool sets and capabilities. Dynamic placeholders, so if you've never used them before, it's essentially allowing multiple renderings in a parent placeholder at the same time, and out-of-box support for dynamic grids, so they can add rows and columns as required to create a layout of their liking. Federated Authentication, so it's based on Microsoft's OWIN technology, but you can plug in any of the standard OAuth type models for authentication, including SAML for other single sign-on type applications. There are membership models, as well as per site configuration. So if you have like an intranet with one authentication model and your extranet with another, you can have a different configuration for different sites. Here's a quick overview of the configuration layers. So the big thing is you don't have to use a folder called ZZZ and a file named ZZZ to specify the order that those things go last. There's now a order of which configuration files are going to come first in a layers.config, and then they've isolated out in the Sitecore components into a Sitecore folder, modules into modules, and then your custom layer is going to go in the include folder, and your environment layer would be in the environment folder. So I think this is a big step in cleaning up the configuration mess that Sitecore has. The one thing to note in upgrades, though, is you're going to have to plan for this and reconfigure your configuration to support the new layered model. Other random improvements, device detection is enabled out of the box. FXM has supports content languages, a new version of .NET Framework 4.6.2, Solar, so a new content search API, and then obviously the Sitecore install framework is one of the biggest things you'll notice. Here's a quick slide on the marketing automation. I personally haven't used this before, so I can't vouch for how much better it is, but it is an improved user interface, drag and drop. A couple capabilities in here also include pre-built templates for common scenarios or user flows. So there's like a few a few starter templates in there for you to use. And the interface is improved and matches some of the newer interfaces that they're using now with drag and drop. And it's also finally free of all Silverlight, so you can run it in your favorite browser. XConnect is the ability to interact with your experience database and bring data in there. Some of the use cases for that could be fitness devices. When someone walks into a store and there's a point of sale system there, you can have that data injected into your experience database. Beacons, call centers, IoT, right? If you watch on the YouTube Sitecore channel, there's the Keynote. I recommend everybody watching that. They do a demo with Toro, the lawnmower and snowblower company, about how they're putting IoT devices on, lawnmowers so that you can detect, vibration or something going wrong with your mower and identify what, services it may need. So this opens up, kind of the floodgates of what's possible to bring into Sitecore that then allows you all that data to, personalize or target or move someone through a campaign or goals that you want. XConnect also opens up the door for other database technologies to be used in your for your experience database. So SQL Server 2016 and SQL Azure are available in 9.0. Cosmos DB and MongoDB are coming in future updates early next year. So you have more flexibility in, if the company or customer you're working with has more skill set in one database technology or another, they can choose the right technology for them. So headless and Sitecore JavaScript Services, JSS is what they're calling it. So this is one of the biggest things I think that they've announced. It's a complete toolkit for modern JavaScript developers to build single-page applications, progressive web apps, and websites where you're using Angular, React, or Vue technologies on the front end. Right now, they have focused their efforts on React. This is still kind of a preview product, but it will be launching soon. The big payoff or punchline here is, you can be completely unplugged as a front-end developer working with Sitecore. It will, serialize your content and your layouts and presentation details into JSON and JavaScript, and you'll be able to interact then with your Sitecore site, offline on a Mac, in just Visual Studio Code or Atom or whatever, developer IDE you want, and then run commands from Grunt, let's say, or Gulp to push your changes into Sitecore. So they have kind of this code-first approach where you could, in theory, download a few NPM packages and skeleton out what your Sitecore site may be. And on the Sitecore side of things, you'll have a Sitecore module installed that will accept that command, and it can push things from your JavaScript environment, actually create templates, renderings, and pages based off of that, and you can work in that model. So there's kind of a code-first approach or a Sitecore first approach. We'll definitely do more of a deep dive on this, but it is definitely something to consider especially if the customer has like an intranet. Maybe we built the intranet on SharePoint or Office 365, and we want to bring content in. We could do this pretty easily in React and using the JavaScript services, and it does support all the personalization and analytics that you want to do. So you could, in theory, have an intranet homepage in SharePoint that or whatever platform their intranet is in, and have it serving content coming from Sitecore, and let SharePoint handle the documents and lists and things that it's good at, and let Sitecore handle content. So some of the other possibilities in headless, obviously it helps with mobile, right? So if you wanted to have a native mobile app, right, you can fill that with content from Sitecore. Obviously, HTML5 and JavaScript apps. It also opens up OData possibilities, right? So if you wanted to bring data into Excel or Power BI from Sitecore, that's now part of the platform. And using Node.js and Java to run the front end of your application in whatever technology you want. Sitecore Cortex. So this is the marketing slide around the Cortex engine. It's a Windows service comprised of a series of machine learning processing pipelines. The big thing that they demoed was this discovery, right? They had a commerce demo where they had Cortex plugged into the MLS. So when you list your house, the listing goes to the marketing listing service. So they were able to figure out that this customer just bought a new house, and because of that, she's very likely, because of her age and demographics, to purchase a sound system for her new home, and target content towards her. So this is able to identify trends and analyze content and score content and do crazy robot things in Sitecore. It's not launched yet, so it's still under development and coming next year. So the capabilities are a little foggy, but it definitely is a welcome, add on to Sitecore, to enhance their capabilities and keep up with the competition and other capabilities out there, and make it so we don't have to build that from scratch. There's more that the platform can do. So let's talk about upgrade a little bit. So there's a couple different upgrade approaches. There's still the update installation wizard. You could also upgrade from the front end perspective using web deploy. I didn't actually go to this session, so they talked about a Helix approach. I'm not sure what the Helix upgrade approach is, but potentially there is one. And then there's the Express migration tool that helps with kind of moving from version to version. And there's also an XDB data migration tool, right? Obviously, if you're on Sitecore 8.1, 8.2, and you have your experience database in Mongo and you want to go to 9, well, you can't just have Mongo anymore. You would have to move that into SQL Server. So there's a XDB migration tool. There is direct migration support using the Express migration from 6.6, 7.2, 7.5, and 8 to 9. It does support web forms for marketers. So web forms for marketers isn't dead yet. You can still have that module on 9.0, but they're not going to keep supporting it for long. It's sort of a stopgap. If you want to upgrade to 9, you can still have your web forms for marketers forms, but it's not going to upgrade the forms to the new Sitecore forms. You'll have to do that yourself. And you can go a one-step upgrade from 8.1 or 8.2 to 9.0. And there's, the typical tools for breaking change analysis and the typical upgrade things you need to consider. Once you are on 9, they now have an update center within Sitecore. So the promise here is that you'll easily be able to download and install updates right from within Sitecore. I didn't go to this session either. I missed this one. I was in another session, but I'm not sure if it actually installs it for you or if it's just a link to download and install. We'll have to investigate this one further and maybe talk about this after a few more upgrades. But it is, I think, a good sign that they're thinking about this and making upgrades easier in the future, where we don't have to use a tool to do all the upgrades. All right, so let's take a look at the future. Kind of at the wrap of the conference, they did a demo of what's coming beyond 9.0. There are 2 products that they talked about, and it's a little fuzzy what everything is, but the 2 names that they used were Zenith and Horizon. This is expected potentially in the 9.1 update, so mid next year. Let's start with Horizon. Horizon is a new experience for editing your content. It's not. They weren't really saying yet that this is going to replace Content Editor and Experience Editor, but I could see where it could. It is kind of like a standalone application where you can edit your content, see it in context, and also have insights at your fingertips on how to optimize things. So one of the things that it has in it is like this device viewer. If you've ever worked on a Sitecore project, I'm sure you would be familiar with that. As a content author, you want to make an update to the homepage and put a new hero in there. You would probably, save it, maybe open it up in Chrome, throw it in mobile testing mode and select your device. Well, now you can do that all within, the editor tool. And see it on different devices. You can rotate the device, see it on iPad, see it on an iPhone, and see metrics about the different devices that you potentially may have in your environment. It also has insights that you can take action on. So it could identify a new segment based on the machine learning, or show you that something is trending. Armchairs are trending is what it says on the screen here, or similar pages are converting better, right? So you could do some analysis of why is this other page converting better, or maybe some journeys are underperforming, and what are some steps that you want to take to improve the performance of that page. They showed kind of this hotspot mode, where you can see where users are gravitating towards on the page. Maybe the floor lamp in this model is not attracting anyone's attention, so maybe you want to put a new spotlight on that. Tracking engagement value per visit, and again, giving you things to improve the performance of the site within the editing experience. They also have this metric of page effectiveness. Not really sure how they're calculating that. I'm guessing it's going to be, how well is this page helping someone get to a goal or a desired outcome. And so that you can maybe remove those pages that are ineffective or improve them to make your site overall more effective. It is also a drag and drop interface. So on the left hand side, it's showing potentially renderings or content that you could add to an item. And again, this is showing that you could be on a mobile view of the page and be adding or editing the content right there, so you can see what it looks like in that device. When you drag and drop this on the page, this example would be like you take an image and you put it on a page. It has context of what you're doing. So in this case, there's already an image or kind of a hero on the page. So it's going to prompt you and say, hey, do you want to convert this into an image rotator, a carousel, or do you want to put another section on the page? Or maybe you want to make this an A/B test, right, where the thing that you're dragging and dropping onto the page is going to be a test comparison to the content you currently have. Or do you want to make it a personalization rule, right? Have this picture of this other chair show if the user, is coming from a certain geography, or they've already purchased, an end table, something like that. It also gives you the ability to interact with the tree in a different way. So this is kind of taking your traditional content tree that's on the left-hand side in Content Editor and making it more sitemap-like, and also visual, right? So you kind of get a snapshot of all those pages. And then it's going to light up those pages with, green, yellow, red indicators to show what pages are not effective in your tree, so that you can, fly over. They call this the flyover view. Fly over into your website and swoop in on the pages that are not performing and, improve them. And then the other part was Zenith. So, Zenith is for headless, and all you need to store, manage, distribute content, designed for dynamic changes in one simple interface, includes all the advanced headless features you'll ever need. So my take on this is that, let's say you're building a headless, mobile app of some sort, and you need to manage the content. I think the idea here is that you could build a quote, Zenith interface that allows someone to quickly manage that content and never know that, they're working with Sitecore, right? That they would get maybe a login page, to make sure that they're logging in, and they would have an experience that just gives them the right content that they need to edit and can make a quick update and push that out. And it's, API driven, and another capability of how you could interact with this content. I think the takeaways from the conference is that, there was a big emphasis on developer freedom, or, architecture freedom, right? You can choose your own XDB database technology. You can work headless and, launch on other platforms that have better, scaling or caching needs that are not built in the platform. They're opening up more and more to headless, right? So you can build your own interfaces for content editing, where Sitecore becomes more of a content engine and, less of a monolithic product. So they really pivoted, I think, in this iteration, and are looking to the future to see how they can fit in the marketplace and still be relevant and not bogged down in having to build all their own tools to play catch up with other marketing suites and things like that. That's about it. Anybody else have anything to add or any questions here in the last 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah, hey, this is Rob. I don't know. I'm sorry, I arrived a little bit late. I don't know if you said with Sitecore 9 the infrastructure changes required. Like for SQL, you have to be on 2016 for it to work.
Yep. Yeah, I talked about that in
Okay.
2016 and
Excellent.
Solar and
Yeah.
in the installation framework. And
Uh,
Rob, if you want to, I mentioned your framework a little bit. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
uh, right now, it's just kind of a, a blanket run a script that runs the Sitecore scripts, but it's a kind of gives you a GUI to put all that in there, and you don't have to mess too much with actual configuration files. Um, I can share a link out to that if anybody needs it. Um, I wanted another note real quick that with Sitecore 9 and their forms module, that it does not support web forms. It is an MVC only, which is why they kept web forms for marketers around.
Yep.
Other than that, super presentation.
Yeah,
Hey,
cool. I
Mike.
sent out the link to this. It's on my OneDrive in Rightpoint, shared with everyone, so everyone should be able to get access to it. I'll throw the recording on the one Office 365 videos, and yeah, hope it was helpful.
Hey, Mike. This is Sabanko from Boston. I got a question for you.
Yep.
The migration to 9 with no Mongo support in 9.0, but it coming in 9.1, was there any like context or justification from Sitecore why they made that decision? And then maybe from the Sitecore side or the Rightpoint side, how do we advise clients that are migrating from an 8x instance into 9 that are currently running Mongo, and then they know that Mongo's coming back in 9.1, and what are we going to go from Mongo to SQL back to Mongo, or is there advantages to stick with SQL, or can you give some context around that if there was any insight to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can start, and maybe Rob, I don't know if you know more,
Yeah.
but I would say first that we'd try to recommend holding off on the migration if they're already on Mongo to wait for when it is supported. That would be at least the least painful migration path. I think it's coming, pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I'm not
I mean, that
sure what
sounds
the
that.
advantage of SQL Server is, or Cosmos. Why would you do Cosmos over Azure SQL, or what are some of the scalability
Right.
considerations or trade-offs?
It seems like the easy answer is to wait and hold off until 9.1. But I think if you were to take that approach, what was Sitecore's mentality, or what were they
Yeah,
thinking?
I
Not
can
having
hop
that.
into that. Yeah, so I actually talked to the people at Mongo when I was at Symposium, and I flat out asked them, like, what the hell happened? And they said it had to do with the fact that in the latest versions of Mongo, they updated some base level drivers that Sitecore could not get the fixes in for in order to support it out the door. They said it would be about 10 weeks after general availability happened, so probably it wasn't necessarily going to be 9.1. They said they would imagine it would be out earlier than that, but about 10 weeks after. So I'm guessing probably mid-January is when we would see that Mongo support again.
Okay, so is the advice to hold off to 9.1, or is anybody going to 9.0?
So we actually in Dallas, we have one client that we are pitching to go to 9.0, and they're on board. We've put the standard caveats in that there may be bugs in Sitecore that we're not responsible for fixing that may cause delays and additional costs. They're on board with it because they don't want to have to go in and grab Mongo. We're going to go put them on SQL. They don't have a high volume site, so it's not like there would be any kind of scalability concerns putting that aggregation database on the same one as the reporting server.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Knowing the issues that the relational database had with the older versions of 6.5 or whatever, whenever they decide to go to Mongo, has that been addressed, or are we just going to face the same problems if we run on 9.0?
So from what I understand, they've optimized the living heck out of this thing, so it shouldn't be any kind of issue. Typically with larger solutions, though, we always recommend putting the reporting and stuff on a separate server anyway, just so it doesn't interfere with the standard content serving process. Uh,
Right.
I imagine putting the aggregation database on there is not going to be a huge issue. I think with the way they did it now with the cloud first support and doing the Azure SQL to allow that horizontal scalability should help fix any of those kind of bottleneck issues. But again, it's only on that aggregation and reporting server.
Okay.
Why would we even bother holding off to tell people to do that, right? In my mind, this is a simpler architecture approach to just take Mongo out of the equation. I mean, there's a reason why they're saying it has to be SQL 2016, because 2016 can supposedly support sharding and that level of scale, right? So there's Mongo's party line, which is, oh, well, they just couldn't support the drivers, but we're still the best. And there's also, Sitecore doing this thing. It's like, well, overall, this architecture is easier without one other effing database in the mix that most people don't understand. I'm not necessarily sure we'd tell people to hold off, right? I mean, it's like, hey, if you can get your hands on 2016 or you want to move to the cloud, we can make this a simpler environment.
Yeah, I think the cost associated with the SQL licensing was prohibitive. Some people, they didn't want to go throw down more money on a SQL license. That's the only reason I can really think. I know that they don't want to go pay for a whole bunch of other licensing. They don't want to pay another fee for Mongo. They want to have all that data stored, within their walls. So that's what made sense for them.
Sure, it works for on-prem, but I mean, they really don't care whether it's what SQL or what database it is.
Yep.
So Rob, you mentioned that you're advising a client to go to 9.0. You're already running on 9.0, or is anybody running on 9.0? And what's the feel there? Does it feel good?
So I have some local instances running, and I've messed around a little bit with it. Honestly, we haven't started the upgrade process. We're trying to hold off a little bit on it because everything that I've heard is that 9.0 update 1 should be dropping sometime mid to late December to take care of those initial fixes. Surfing the Sitecore chat Slack, I haven't seen anybody having any major breaking issues.
I mean, we've got some new builds starting, Steve, that we're going to do it, but I don't think anybody's like full in, waist deep in it right now.
Great.
All right. Any other questions?
Thanks, guys.
All right. Stay tuned for more sessions that dive deeper into some of the other capabilities. But thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thanks, you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Bye.